This is Polyamory Weekly, tales from the front of responsible non-monogamy from a pansexual, kink-friendly point of view. A warning for our under-18 listeners. This is an adult-oriented podcast about really lascivious things, like communication and honesty in relationships. If you're under 18 and looking for upfront advice and answers to questions about sex, please visit scarletteen.com.
This is Polyamory Weekly, episode 514 for April 20th, 2017. Coming up on today's show, how do I tell my partner no? That's coming up on today's show. Hello, everyone. I am your host, Minx, and sitting in the co-host chair today is Kevin Patterson from Poly Role Models. Welcome back, Kevin.
Hey, Minx. How are you doing?
I am doing just fantastic and so much happier now that you're here.
Oh, thank you.
Well, we have a challenging topic today. I don't give you the easy ones, do I?
No, but that's what I'm here for.
But first, we have a quick announcement. Do you want to talk about the Multilinking and Polyamory Virtual Con?
I do. It's the Accessible Multilinking and Polyamory Virtual Con, and it's a new conference, and the purpose of it is to be accessible to people who can't usually either attend or afford a traditional relationship conference. It's all done online, so there's no fear of missing out where I didn't make it to RelateCon. I would have loved to have made it to RelateCon. If it was online, maybe I could have made it there, certain things like that. So it's being held online. It's going to be the first weekend in November, and the organizers are going to be running mini workshops and events and things over the summer just to show people how the con is going to work. If you're looking for more information about it, you can find it at www.multilinking.org.
That's a really great idea. And it's good for people who maybe not just for those who can't physically access a conference for some reason, but also I know that everybody's worried about finances these days, right?
Yes. Yeah. There's so many conferences that I wanted to be able to make it to. There was RelateCon in Idaho.
Oh.
There was ConvergeCon in Vancouver. There was Solo PolyCon also in Vancouver within a couple of weeks of ConvergeCon in Vancouver. And I could make it to none of them because finances and childcare and all of the things.
Yeah, it is tough to get out to a lot of cons, and that's why I have to limit my conference attendance as well. And for me, it's partially finances, but also time and energy.
Yeah.
I'm still kind of recovering from RelateCon.
And my kids are weaponized cuteness, but people don't always want to watch my kids so that my wife and I, or my girlfriend and I, or my girlfriend and I, or my girlfriend and I can get to wherever conference we are trying to go to.
Yeah, it is, it is taxing in terms of energy, time, and all the resources. So I'd be really curious to see how that goes across and how many listeners they have, or viewers, I guess I should say, participants, and see how that works and see if that might be a good model for the future too.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm excited.
So our question today is from listener Eva, who is a 27-year-old Australian. Why couldn't she call in with her sexy accent?
Agreed.
I know. Okay. She said, my existing partner Denise and I live together, and we're great at checking in daily, and I have a routine of seeing Lisa, her girlfriend, for one sleepover a week and sometimes one date a week. Lately, Lisa has been requesting more time together, and while I love the time we share together, I don't want to push anything with my existing partner. I know I can ask for extra special dates if we have a special event, like anniversary or birthday, but how do I manage my weekly routine? I love the time I get to spend with Lisa, but I feel bad saying no to her wanting 2 nights a week. While things started off a bit fast with her moving down, I really want to find some stability with my new poly life, and 1 night a week feels manageable right now. She said, I haven't read a lot on time management of multiple partners and busy poly people, so I'd appreciate you chatting about this if you have time. It seems like this is all we talk about sometimes.
Yeah, communication and time management.
Oh, yeah. I feel like if you've ever been to a poly get-together, It's exactly that. Communication and time management are pretty much the perennial topics.
Yeah. My Google Calendar at one point with all the different partners and all the different colors, it looked like a bowl of Fruit Loops at some point.
Everybody's Google Calendar does. And frankly, I only have one partner and mine still looks like a bowl of Fruit Loops because I have different calendars for work and for doctor visits and for partners. And I also keep the pool schedule for all the local pools. And I keep every single West Coast dance social event that is available. I keep on my calendar as well, just so if we end up having a teensy bit of energy, we can go West Coast swing dancing at the drop of a hat.
Nice.
So, yeah, fun times. So, Kevin, you want to take a stab at this?
I'm wondering about whether or not the writer is using her partner Denise as a shield. I mean, maybe it's just the way the letter is worded, but there's nothing that indicates that Denise would have an issue with the letter writer spending more time with this new partner. So is it a matter of not wanting to lean into the routine on behalf of this partner, Denise? Or is it a matter of you just don't want to? Because if you don't want to spend more time with this new person that you're seeing, just be honest. Let's say, hey, one day a week, one date a week, special events, that's enough for me right now.
Yeah, I kind of feel the same way. That I think the truest thing she said was, I really want to find some stability with my new poly life, and one night a week feels manageable right now.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe there is something she just didn't happen to mention in the letter that has happened with Denise, and so she feels the need to spend more time with Denise, her live-in partner. But what it comes down to me, is what feels manageable to you right now. If you feel that you can only handle one night a week with Lisa, then tell Lisa, I love you, I care about you, I understand and appreciate you having the courage to ask me for 2 nights a week, and it's great that you're asking for what you want. Right now, I feel like one night a week is all I can manage.
Yeah.
And then talk about it from there. Maybe there's a timeline. Sometimes we know that I just need a month of this, or I just need 6 months of this, or I know that it takes me a year to settle into something. Maybe you know and can give a timeline, but you don't even have to. All you really have to do is be as honest with her as you are with us and say what it is that you want. There might be some way to negotiate from there.
Yeah, absolutely. You just got to be honest about where you're at. I know I've been on both sides of it where I've had people where I could see them once a week, and I would have loved to be able to see them 2 or 3 times a week, but once a week was what I had. It was all I had to give. And then there were other partners where I was seeing them once a week, and even if I had the room to see them more than that, once a week was really all that I could, all the bandwidth that I could put out for that partner or in that situation. And you just have to be honest about it. And settling into your poly life and finding a routine, finding something that makes it work is critical. But you just have to be honest about the reasons why, even if you're just being honest with yourself, you know?
Yeah, and again, there may be compromises here. I mean, of course, we never want to hurt anybody's feelings. If you can only manage one date night a week with Lisa, maybe there's something else. Maybe the 3 of you can walk the dog together on the weekends, or maybe every other weekend, the 3 of you go out for brunch. I personally, I love doing chores with my partners. I know that sounds weird, but I actually love cooking dinner with Lusty Guy. We don't get to do it very often because it seems like there's never time to actually go to the grocery store, buy the food, cook the dinner, and then eat the dinner. We always have to sacrifice one, and it usually ends up being making the dinner. We'll pick something that can easily be made in 10 minutes as opposed to cooking from scratch. But whatever, there might be something that maybe the 3 of you could do together.
Yeah, you find that Venn diagram sweet spot and you make it work from there.
Yeah. For our feedback this week, we heard from Vir Modestus about episode 507. So what he said was, I agree with what Minx and Kevin said, about 85%, but he writes, there's one aspect, one point of view you and Kevin both took that just doesn't sit right with me. It isn't just that episode, and it's not just you, but it's how some poly people categorize people who are insecure. And he actually wrote an entire blog post about it called I'm Not Insecure, She/He's Not Safe. In that, he makes the point that if you'll recall in episode 507, we had a woman writing to us asking us how to deal with her insecurities after her husband had violated a rule in their relationship. And Vir writes, her husband has just shown to her that he is not willing to keep to his agreements. She is actually justifiably insecure because he's proven to her that she should not feel secure in his promises. So he concludes, the biggest problem is that I hear this dismissive attitude all the time. Oh, you're just being insecure is a phrase that's flung about as if it is an irrefutable argument, a taunt to shut down discussion, to shame the person feeling uncertain, leaving the person who is being an unsafe partner free of scrutiny. The reality is that the lack of feeling secure is because they know that they don't get to ask for what they want and to have that request respected. Minx and Kevin were right to discuss the ways in which feelings of unwarranted insecurity can be overcome, but where they messed up was in dismissing the feelings of this letter writer as unwarranted. So what say you to that, Kevin?
I try to be really careful in terms of when it comes to rules and boundaries. Something that a lot of us do when we're newer to poly, or when we're in our newer situations where we're just sort of in uncharted waters, a lot of times we make and agree to rules that we don't really understand the full ramifications of. So I don't want to dismiss anybody's insecurities. I don't want to make anyone's fears feel invalid. But in a lot of cases, we make these arbitrary rules that sound very well-meaning, but then aren't as reasonable in practice. So yeah, I mean, it's unsafe, and people do need to be taken to task for breaking rules and violating. You know, I'm not even sure if we should call it a boundary, where if you're setting a boundary for somebody else, that's not really a boundary. You can place boundaries on yourself. You can't really place boundaries on other people and what their actions are supposed to be. But if you are trying to set rules on other people's actions, a lot of times we agree to these things without really understanding what we're getting into, and then in the moment it feels unreasonable. Obviously, more conversation needs to happen before you go ahead, but both sides of that do need to be discussed and investigated.
Yeah, I feel like there are two issues here. One issue is what you were just talking about, which is, was this a boundary or a rule, and is it reasonable to place a rule like that on your partner to begin with? Which I don't think I don't remember exactly, but I'm not sure we actually even dealt with that in the episode. But I feel like what Vir is taking issue with is the fact that we assumed that the rule was based on an unfounded insecurity. So let's talk about the latter and then go back to the former. So is it okay to call this an insecurity and address it? I actually think it is, for a couple of reasons. So the letter writer referred to it as an insecurity. So she said, I am insecure about this. So of course, I'm going to take her word for it. The second thing is, I think we can argue that almost all fears and insecurities are in some way warranted. We are generally afraid of things for very good reasons. Now, they may be in the past, and one of the reasons we do these drill down exercises on our fears and insecurities is because we may realize that fear is from when I was 5 years old or 10 years old, or in my first relationship when I was 20 and nobody's treated me that way in 20 years. So maybe I don't really need to have that fear, or maybe I should give that fear a little bit less voice these days. So I don't think that simply calling something a fear or an insecurity means that it is unwarranted. I have very good reasons for most all of my fears and insecurities. Right? Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. I think something that needs to be addressed in that is that when you have those fears, when you have those insecurities, and it weighs against somebody else, an end state maybe needs to be addressed in there as well, where if you're saying, well, I've got an insecurity about your interactions with somebody else, Are we going to a place with that? Is that something that you're going to work on? Is that something that I'm always going to have to address on your behalf? Or is that something that you're going to try to process your way through? Where I've got a fear of bees. I never have to worry about my fear of bees with anybody else because it only affects me. Where if I was dating someone who was, say, a beekeeper, this might be a conversation that we have to have.
I think it would be an interesting challenge for you to date a beekeeper.
Yeah, it's a hard limit for me. Yeah. It's never going to happen.
Yeah. I think part of what's going on here is exactly what Vir pointed out, that in some cases, people use the words fear or insecurity or jealousy as a put down to somebody else. Like, oh, you're just insecure. You're just jealous. You just have this fear. Our fears, insecurities, and jealousies, first of all, they're simply emotions. They are neither good nor bad. So placing judgment on them really isn't valuable. And second, most of them are there for a pretty good reason, or at least a reason, right? Now,
yeah, absolutely.
If I am insecure, like for example, for a long time, I had insecurities around communication with my metamor because I had a horrible first poly experience where I was in a relationship for 5 years. My metamor wouldn't communicate with me and said that it didn't have anything to do with me. She just didn't want to. And it turned out that that wasn't true. It turned out that she never wanted me to be there and basically put me through hell for 5 years. And so after that, yeah, I was a little insecure about communication with my metamors, but I owned that. There was a reason for it. It doesn't necessarily mean that I should have a knee-jerk reaction in every relationship, but I knew it was going to take me a while to, I hate saying get over it because it makes it sound like I'm just sort of dismissing it, as Vir pointed out, but I knew that it would take a while to heal for that and to give that insecurity a little bit less voice. So I didn't make it anybody else's problem, but what I did do was tell all of my metamors, look, I have this thing about communication. It's not your fault, but it is a thing that I need more of. And here's the things that I'm going to need for me to be comfortable in this relationship. And most of them were happy to give that. So I don't think just because we call it an insecurity means that we're making a judgment about the person. It's that sort of the societal stigma coming in.
Yeah. I mean, people have their feelings and they're valid, and they need to be addressed and sometimes even accommodated. So it's not, like you said, it's not a value judgment.
Yeah. Now, if we want to go back to that first issue of was that a boundary or a rule, I actually do agree with you. Boundaries are how we define the limits of our own behavior. If you are a beekeeper, then I'm probably not going to date you.
Yeah.
Or if you're a beekeeper because I have a giant fear of bees, then we're going to have a lot of communication about how we interact because I have this fear of bees. That's a limit on my own behavior, and I own that. What she was discussing sounds a hell of a lot more like a rule because it is a specific control placed on someone else's behavior. It was, you are not allowed to have PIV sex. Now, I'm not saying that is necessarily good or bad, but most of you folks know that I'm generally not in favor of rules, not as a value judgment, but simply because, as Lost and Confused figured out, they don't do what you think they're going to do. You place a rule on somebody, and I guarantee that we as human beings are at some point going to break that rule, and now it's a BFD.
Yes.
Right? However, and you're also trying to control someone else's behavior, which is just insane. As any preschool teacher can tell you, trying to control other people's behavior is a way to make yourself go crazy. So as adults, what we tend to do is I tend to recommend as more successful strategies, recognizing the limits of your own behavior. So with the understanding that maybe your partner may or may not have PIV sex with somebody else, maybe talk about your own feelings, talk about your own emotions, talk about what you need to feel secure in the relationship. It's kind of like in dating, when we talk about writing the user manual, we talk about writing the positive things that people can do to get the best results from you, as opposed to here's a list of don'ts. So I'm wondering if maybe it might have been more helpful to give Lost and Confused a little bit of advice on how she can work towards feeling more secure in the relationship, not just with, in terms of delving down into that one insecurity, but in terms of setting up personal boundaries that will actually work for her, because clearly the rules aren't working very well.
something that I really enjoyed out of Franklin Vo's book, The Game Changer, is there are a couple of cases in there where Franklin makes agreements that seem pretty innocuous at the time. Just, nothing too big that he can't handle. And only to find out later that adhering to these agreements would be akin to ripping out his own heart. And he does that a couple of times, but that doesn't help the situation. It only makes him resent his partners for making him it makes him resent himself for agreeing to things without really thinking them through, and it makes him resent his partner for agreeing to things that were about her insecurity and not, the benefit of their relationship. And it's something that I'm always sort of try to remain cognizant of, and was something that I was trying to read into the letter writer's comment when we recorded before.
I'm a big fan of discussing boundaries versus rules. And this is another area where a boundary might have been more helpful. Instead of saying, you can't have PIV sex with anybody, it might have been more helpful to say, I would really feel much more secure in our relationship if you would tell me when it looks like you might want to have PIV sex with somebody else so that I can have time to process.
Yeah.
That's a little bit more reasonable. And it's not a veto, right? It is asking for behavior, but it's a very small and reasonable communicative behavior that I think might work a little bit better for Lost and Confused than making an outright rule against things, since, again, clearly that didn't work out too well for her.
Yeah. And if I remember it right, both the letter writer and her partner were both sort of wading into that PIV space, and it didn't quite work for one, and it quite possibly worked for a short time with the other. There's a lot of gray area as to who agreed to what there and who adhered to which agreements.
Oh yeah, I had a partner who used to he would debate the letter of the law with you till you were blue in the face. He would never just accept the true expression of your emotions at something unexpected coming up, and would simply say, well, but it wasn't this, because, he would always come up with all these technicalities as to why he didn't actually break the rule, which is another experience in my own life that led me to believe that placing personal boundaries and having a full understanding and being able to communicate your personal boundaries is way more important than setting any rules, because rules you just end up fighting over.
Yeah, there's no such thing as a fence that people don't want to see the other side of.
Yeah. Yeah. And again, I'm sorry to slam on people who do rules too much. I just find that they don't tend to be as productive as it sounds like when you're setting them. And having a full awareness of your own personal boundaries is way more helpful. At any rate, I really appreciate that Vir took the time not only to write us, but to write a blog post so that we could talk about this in a little bit more detail.
Yeah, definitely.
It's time for your Happy Poly Moment of the Week, brought to you by Fubbly Polyamorists everywhere.
Got a happy poly moment, Minx, if you've got a moment to hear me blather on about nothing.
Happiness is not nothing.
Fair enough.
Yeah, tell us your happy poly moment.
My kids, the ones of weaponized cuteness that I mentioned, I had them signed up for a series of races. There's a race series. It's called like Healthy Kids Running Series, and based on age group, kids get to run. And I had a partner in town who had just come down from New York to see me for the day. She came, we went, hung out with other people, we had food, and then she came with me to these races. At the same time, my girlfriend was there, and my wife was there, and my wife was there with her boyfriend. So it's the five of us, and so my kids end up having this huge cheering section of 5 people, and I'm sure we might have gotten a couple of looks at, there was lots of cross hand holding and hugs and things, but that's their problem, not mine. But it was really cool to see my kids so amazingly loved by such a wide variety of people. just there to show up and support them. And it was pretty awesome. It was a good day.
That sounds fantastic. That's a great happy poly moment.
Thank you.
And if any of you have a happy poly moment, you can always mail it to polyweekly@gmail.com, or you can reach out to Lusty Guy, specifically at lustyguy@polyweekly.com. You can call it in to 802-505-POLY, or you can tweet us on Twitter @polyweekly, or find us on Facebook, facebook.com/polyweekly. Well, thanks everybody for listening, and remember, it's not all about the sex.